You know how it is. You could be watching something in English, totally get the jokes, follow all the twists and turns. But then when you actually have to speak, it feels like there's this disconnect, like your brain and your mouth aren't quite on the same page.
Yeah, that gap.
That frustrating gap between understanding and speaking fluently. That's what we're diving into today, specifically for you, if you're listening, and you're ready to finally bridge that gap.
It's such a common hurdle, it really is. And what's fascinating is that it's often not just about knowing more words or, grammar rules. There's some really interesting reasons why speaking can feel so much harder.
Exactly. So in this deep dive, we're going to explore the core reasons behind this challenge. We'll look at why relying on mental translation can hold you back.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Then, crucially, we'll get into how to actually start thinking directly in English. We'll also tackle that universal fear of making mistakes, because let's be honest, that stops a lot of people. And finally, we'll equip you with some genuinely practical speaking techniques you can, use right away.
And to give you a solid understanding, we're drawing on insights into how the brain actually processes language alongside concrete, actionable tips. Our aim is simple: to provide you with the knowledge and the real tools to move from just understanding English to speaking it with real confidence.
Okay, so let's kick things off. Why does speaking often feel like such an uphill battle when understanding can feel relatively, smooth?
Yeah.
What's the fundamental difference there?
That's the key question, isn't it? And it's important to understand that this isn't a reflection of your intelligence or how well you've studied.
Right.
Think about it this way. Listening to a piece of music is one thing. You can appreciate its complexity, its beauty. But then imagine trying to actually play that same piece.
Ah, okay.
Suddenly, you need a whole new set of skills coordination between your hands, muscle memory for the keys, maybe years of dedicated practice.
That really puts it into perspective. It's not just about recognizing the notes. It's about the physical act of producing them.
Precisely. Speaking requires a really complex interplay of muscle memory and mental coordination. Think about the physical mechanics involved, the incredibly precise movements of your tongue, lips, and vocal cords needed to create those specific English sounds.
Stuff we don't even think about in our native language.
Exactly. Native speakers have built up this intricate muscle memory over years of constant use, so it feels completely automatic. For someone learning, it can feel slow and almost clumsy at first because your brain is working so hard to consciously control all those movements.
And beyond the mechanics, there's also that feeling of being, on stage, right? It's not just about getting the sounds right. It's about putting yourself out there.
Absolutely. Speaking is, in a sense, a performance. It can feel vulnerable, and that's where confidence plays a huge role. Even if you have a strong grasp of vocabulary and grammar, that nervousness can cause you to stumble or, freeze up. But the encouraging thing is that confidence isn't a fixed trait. It actually grows with practice and positive experiences.
So the more you do it.
The more you do it, the more comfortable and confident you'll become. It builds on itself.
Which naturally leads us to what I think is a huge obstacle for so many: the fear of making mistakes. It's like this invisible wall that prevents people from even attempting to speak sometimes.
That fear is such a significant hurdle, and it's completely understandable. But it's so important to shift your perspective on mistakes. In language learning, they aren't failures. They're actually absolutely vital stepping stones.
Okay.
Every error you make is an opportunity to pinpoint a gap in your knowledge and learn from it. It's like getting real-time feedback that guides you towards greater accuracy and, fluency.
So it's not just in our heads. There's actually a scientific reason why speaking and understanding engage our brains differently, right? You mentioned brain science earlier.
Yeah, what's fascinating from a neurological perspective is that different areas of your brain are primarily involved in these two processes. Comprehension, or understanding what you hear, mainly activates regions like Wernicke's area.
Wernicke's area, okay.
Production, actually forming and speaking sentences, relies more heavily on Broca's area.
Broca's area, got it.
So while you might have well-developed neural pathways for understanding English, your brain needs specific training and consistent practice to build those strong and efficient connections for producing spoken English.
Right, like different muscles.
It's like training different sets of muscles in your body. One can be strong, but the others still need work. And this is where the concept of neuroplasticity comes in your brain's amazing ability to adapt and form new connections with consistent effort.
So practice actually changes your brain.
Literally. Every time you actively try to speak, you're strengthening those crucial connections between Broca's and other language-related areas, literally rewiring your brain for greater fluency.
That's a really powerful way to think about it. Okay, so knowing all this, what are some concrete initial steps our listener can take to start bridging this gap, like right now?
Okay, there are several key strategies you can start implementing right away. Firstly, immerse yourself in English as much as possible.
Immerse. Okay.
This means actively seeking out opportunities to hear and see the language, movies, music, podcasts, audiobooks. Even something as simple as changing the language settings on your phone and other devices can make a difference.
Yeah, I did that. It's surprisingly helpful.
Right. The more you're exposed, the more natural the rhythm and sounds of English will begin to feel. Then there's a technique called shadowing.
Shadowing, right.
Where you listen to a native speaker and try to mimic exactly what they're saying in real time. Find short audio or video clips and focus on repeating their pronunciation, intonation, and rhythm as closely as you can.
I've heard about shadowing, and it sounds like it might feel a bit awkward at first, but I can see how it would really help with getting a feel for the language, the music of it.
It can feel a little strange initially, yeah, but it's incredibly effective for building that muscle memory for pronunciation and getting a better sense of natural speech flow. Another really valuable tool is recording yourself speaking.
Ooh, that sounds scary.
It might feel a bit uncomfortable to listen back to yourself, I get that, but it allows you to objectively identify areas where you can improve your pronunciation, intonation, and overall fluency.
Okay, objective feedback.
Exactly. Also, try breaking down longer sentences into smaller, more manageable chunks. This reduces the mental load when you're speaking and helps you build up to expressing more complex ideas smoothly.
Chunking. Got it.
And finally, actively look for opportunities for language exchange with native speakers. Real-world conversation practice is invaluable for improving your skills and, crucially, building your confidence.
These all sound like really practical things someone can start doing today. Now let's talk about something I think almost every language learner experiences. That constant urge to translate everything in your head before you say it.
Ah, yes, the mental translator.
It feels like a natural first step, but it often becomes a major stumbling block, doesn't it?
You've hit on a really critical point. Mental translation seems like the logical starting point, but it's actually a very inefficient way to speak and often leads to speech that sounds, well, hesitant and unnatural.
So what exactly makes it so problematic?
Yeah.
What are the main downsides of having this constant internal translator running in the background?
Well, there are several significant drawbacks. The most immediate one is the time delay. Conversations move quickly, right?
Right.
And if you're constantly translating back and forth between your native language and English, you'll inevitably fall behind, leading to disjointed and awkward interactions.
Makes sense, you miss your cue.
Exactly. Secondly, languages have their own unique structures, idioms, and expressions that don't always translate directly word for word. A literal translation can often sound very unnatural, maybe even nonsensical in English.
Yeah, I've definitely heard that kind of thing.
And finally, the mental effort involved in constantly translating is incredibly draining. It creates a huge cognitive load, making it much harder to focus on the actual conversation, understand what's being said to you, and express your own thoughts clearly.
It's like your brain is trying to juggle two different languages simultaneously, and it ends up doing neither of them particularly well.
Precisely. And what's so interesting is how bilingual brains actually function. They aren't constantly translating. Instead, they're wired to think directly in each language.
Oh, interesting.
Different neural pathways become active depending on which language they're using, and when they're speaking one language, the other is temporarily suppressed. This allows for that fluid, direct expression without the need for that intermediary translation step.
That makes perfect sense. So the goal then is to try and bypass that internal translator as much as possible and start thinking directly in English. But how do you even begin to do that? It feels like trying to break a really ingrained habit.
It definitely takes conscious effort and consistent practice, no doubt. One really powerful strategy is to deepen your immersion in English.
Back to immersion again.
Yep. The more you surround yourself with the language through reading, listening, even your internal thoughts, the more naturally your brain will start to process information directly in English. Another surprisingly effective technique is to start consciously labeling the objects around you with their English names.
Labeling, like sticky notes.
Could be sticky notes, or just mentally. Instead of first thinking of the word in your native language, make a direct mental connection with the English word. Chair, table, window.
That's a really practical and tangible way to start building those direct associations.
Absolutely. Another helpful exercise is to start narrating your day to yourself in English. As you go about your daily routine, try to think and describe your actions, your surroundings, even your thoughts in English. I'm making coffee now, this traffic is bad, stuff like that.
Like an internal monologue.
Exactly. And initially, when you encounter new words or phrases, make a deliberate effort to translate them into English in your mind, just once or twice maybe. Over time, with repetition, this process will become more automatic, gradually paving the way for thinking directly in English.
You also mentioned the importance of learning and using common English phrases. How does that relate to thinking in English?
Mastering and actively using high-frequency English phrases is absolutely key. Instead of trying to construct every single sentence from scratch by translating individual words, start thinking in terms of these ready-made chunks of language.
Like pre-built blocks.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
When you need to express a common idea, try to recall the whole phrase in English rather than translating it word by word, like "how's it going?" or "could you tell me?"
Right.
Also, actively seek out opportunities to use English in different contexts. Join English speaking clubs, attend events where English is spoken, participate in online forums. Keeping a journal in English is also a really valuable way to practice expressing your thoughts directly in writing, which can then translate to your spoken English.
Makes sense. Practicing the output.
And finally, pay really close attention when you're listening to native speakers. Notice how they structure their sentences and express their ideas, and try to internalize those patterns. It's not just the words, but the way they're put together.
So it's about creating an environment, both internal and external, where English becomes the default language, even in your own thoughts. Let's delve a bit deeper into those strategies for actually cultivating that English thinking brain. What are some more concrete ways someone can make this a consistent practice?
Okay, creating that truly immersive environment is foundational. We touched on it, but let's really elaborate on some specific actions you can take. When you're watching movies or TV shows, make a conscious effort to gradually reduce your reliance on subtitles.
That's a tough one for some people.
It can be, but it pays off. Start by watching with subtitles in your native language if needed, then switch to English subtitles, and ultimately aim to watch without any subtitles at all. Do the same with music. Don't just listen to the melody, actively try to understand the lyrics. Changing the language settings on all your electronic devices, from your phone to your social media apps, forces you to interact with English constantly throughout your day.
Yeah, that constant exposure.
And physically labeling objects around your home and workplace with their English names, like we said, really does create those direct visual linguistic links in your mind. Don't forget, the power of flashcards create them not just with single words, but with common English phrases as well, and keep them in places where you'll see them regularly.
So it's about making English unavoidable in your daily life, even in the most mundane tasks. What about that practice of mental translation you mentioned? Not translating before speaking, but using translation as a tool to build that direct thinking. How can someone make that a useful step?
Right. The key here is intentionality and consistency. Start by consciously narrating your daily activities in English to yourself, even if it feels a little strange or forced at first.
That's talking to yourself.
Basically, yeah, but in your head mostly. Be as detailed as you can in your descriptions and actively try to use a variety of vocabulary. Engage in that internal monologue. Think about your plans for the day, your opinions on something you read, your grocery list, all in English.
Okay.
Visualization can also be an incredibly effective tool. Mentally rehearse conversations you might have in different scenarios. Imagine the setting, the people you're talking to, and practice your responses in English in your head.
Like a mental rehearsal.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of associating vivid mental images with English words and phrases. The more senses you can engage, sight, sound, even smell or touch if relevant, the stronger that mental connection will be.
These all sound like really active ways to engage with the language internally, not just passively receiving it. What about actively seeking out opportunities to use English with others? That seems crucial.
That's absolutely crucial for solidifying your ability to think and speak in English. Join English-speaking communities, both in your local area if possible, and definitely online. Participate actively in discussions on topics that interest you.
Get involved.
Right. Language exchange apps and websites are fantastic resources for connecting with native speakers, specifically for language practice. Don't shy away from writing in English. Keep that journal we talked about. Consider starting a blog about a hobby, or contribute to online forums or comment sections in English.
Writing helps organize thoughts too.
It really does. Even playing language-based games like word association games or using language learning apps that require you to think and respond in English can be really beneficial and enjoyable. And if you enjoy a bit of friendly competition, look for online English trivia nights or language learning challenges.
Make it fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you also mentioned really tuning into the rhythm and flow of the language. How can someone develop that more intuitive feel for how English sounds? It's more than just words, right?
Definitely more than words. Active listening with a focus on more than just the words is key here. Pay attention not only to the vocabulary native speakers use, but also to their intonation, the rise and fall of their voice that conveys meaning and emotion.
The melody of the language.
Exactly. The stress they place on certain syllables within words and certain words within sentences, and the overall rhythm and pacing of their speech. Make a conscious effort to mimic these patterns when you speak.
Mimicry.
Yeah. We talked about shadowing earlier, and this is where that technique becomes particularly relevant. Start with short audio or video segments of native speakers and really focus on matching their rhythm and intonation as closely as possible, even if you don't understand every single word initially.
Focus on the sound.
Focus on the sound and the flow. And as you become more comfortable, actively try to incorporate common English idioms and expressions into your everyday speech. These often contribute significantly to the natural flow and nuance of the language.
It sounds like a really holistic approach, surrounding yourself with English, actively practicing thinking in it, engaging with others, and really tuning into the subtleties of the spoken language. And it's so important to remember to be patient and kind to yourself throughout this process, right? It doesn't happen overnight.
Absolutely. Couldn't stress that enough. Set realistic and achievable goals for yourself. Don't expect to completely switch to thinking in English overnight. It's a gradual process. Practice resilience. There will be times when it feels challenging and you might feel like you're not making progress, but consistency is absolutely key.
Keep going.
Keep going. And cultivate gratitude for the progress you are making, no matter how small it might seem. Maybe set a small, specific goal each week, like learning 5 new English phrases, and keep a simple journal to track your progress and acknowledge your efforts. Celebrate those small wins.
Now, let's face one of the biggest hurdles for many language learners: the fear of making mistakes. It's something that keeps so many people from actually opening their mouths and practicing. Why is this fear so powerful, and how can our listeners start to overcome it?
Oh, the fear of mistakes. Yeah, it's incredibly common, and it's often deeply rooted in a natural desire to avoid judgment, embarrassment, or feeling inadequate. We worry about sounding foolish or not being understood by others.
Yeah, total.
But as we touched on earlier, it's absolutely crucial to understand that mistakes are not only a natural part of language learning, but they are actually essential for progress. Think back to how you learned your very first language as a child.
Yeah, kids make mistakes constantly.
Constantly. It was a process filled with countless errors in pronunciation and grammar, but those very errors were vital for your linguistic development. You learned through them.
It's almost like we hold ourselves to a much higher standard when learning a second language as adults, expecting a level of perfection we wouldn't dream of imposing on a child learning to speak.
Exactly. And the reality is that most people are actually very understanding and often quite impressed by the effort someone is making to learn their language. So that initial fear of negative judgment is often far greater in our minds than it is in reality.
That's reassuring.
What's fascinating, too, is the actual cognitive benefit of making mistakes. They act like little alarm bells in your brain, highlighting the specific areas where your understanding or your application of the language needs more practice.
Like a diagnostic tool.
Precisely. For example, if you consistently mix up verb tenses, those mistakes clearly show you where to focus your study. Furthermore, the very act of making a mistake, receiving correction perhaps, and then learning from it can actually strengthen the memory retention of the correct form.
So how can someone actively work on shifting that mindset from fearing mistakes to actually seeing them as valuable learning opportunities? It's easier said than done.
It really starts with making a conscious decision to embrace imperfection. Understand and truly believe that making mistakes is an inherent part of the language learning journey, not a sign of failure. Try to consciously reframe those errors in your mind.
Reframe. How?
Instead of thinking, oh no, I messed up, try asking yourself, okay, what can I learn from this specific mistake? Actively celebrate the small victories every time you attempt to speak, every time you understand a new phrase, every time you successfully correct a mistake. This helps to build your confidence and maintain your motivation.
So it's about being kinder and more patient with yourself and focusing on the progress you're making, rather than fixating on achieving immediate perfection. What are some practical steps someone can take to actively work on overcoming this fear in real-world situations?
Okay, practical steps. Start by deliberately seeking out low-pressure practice environments. Find a language partner or a tutor who is known for being supportive and encouraging.
A safe space.
Exactly. Gradually increase the challenge as your confidence grows. Recording yourself speaking, as we discussed earlier, can also be incredibly helpful as it allows you to become more comfortable with the sound of your own voice in English and identify areas for self-correction in a private and non-judgmental setting. Joining supportive language learning communities, whether online or in person, where mistakes are seen as normal and even encouraged, can make a huge difference.
Knowing you're not alone.
Absolutely. Setting realistic and achievable goals for your speaking practice is also key. Don't aim for flawless fluency in your first conversation. And finally, try incorporating positive self-talk and affirmations into your routine. Remind yourself that mistakes are okay, that you are learning, and that you are making progress. I can do this.
You also mentioned the importance of learning from native speakers in this context. How can observing and interacting with them help us overcome this fear?
Well, pay close attention to how native speakers themselves handle minor mistakes in conversation. You'll likely notice that everyone, even fluent speakers, occasionally misspeak or correct themselves.
Okay, yeah, that's true.
They usually don't dwell on it or become overly self-conscious. They simply acknowledge the error, maybe laugh it off, and move on with the conversation.
Good point.
Don't be afraid to proactively ask native speakers for feedback on your speaking. Most people are genuinely happy to help language learners and can offer valuable insights into areas where you can improve. Just ask politely, hey, could you let me know if I make any major mistakes?
Right.
And of course, the more you actively practice having conversations with native speakers, the more you'll realize that it's often a very supportive and encouraging environment where mistakes are seen as a natural part of the language learning journey.
It really does sound like it all circles back to consistency, patience, and that crucial element of self-compassion throughout the entire process. Now let's shift gears and talk about some really concrete and actionable techniques that our listener can start implementing right away to actively improve their speaking fluency and overall confidence. Let's get tactical.
Absolutely. Let's get tactical. There are several highly effective techniques you can start using immediately. We've already highlighted shadowing, and it's a technique that's truly worth emphasizing.
Okay, more on shadowing.
The key is to choose audio or video material that's just slightly above your current comprehension level, but features clear and natural speech. Listen actively, focusing not just on understanding the words, but also on the speaker's pronunciation of individual sounds, their intonation patterns, and the stress they place on different words.
So listen deeply.
Listen deeply. Then try to mimic what you hear in real time, focusing on matching the speaker as closely as possible. Start with short segments, maybe just a sentence or two, and gradually increase the length as you become more comfortable.
It's almost like you're temporarily borrowing their fluency until you develop your own natural flow, like training wheels for speaking.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. Another incredibly powerful technique is to regularly record yourself speaking.
Okay, the recording again. How to make it less intimidating.
Choose a topic you're reasonably comfortable with. It could be something you did that day, your opinion on a current event, or even just a description of your surroundings. Jot down a few bullet points if it helps you stay on track, and then record yourself speaking for just a few minutes.
Keep it short and simple.
Keep it manageable. Afterwards, listen back critically. Pay attention to your fluency. Are there many pauses or filler words like or How clear is your pronunciation? Does your intonation sound natural or a bit flat?
Be your own coach.
Be your own coach, exactly. Identify specific areas where you feel you could improve, and then maybe re-record yourself focusing on just one or two of those points. It's amazing how much you can learn by simply hearing yourself speak and consciously trying to improve with each recording.
That sounds like a really direct and effective route to self-improvement. What other practical techniques can someone incorporate into their practice?
Okay, we also discussed the technique of chunking, which is particularly useful for building fluency with longer sentences.
Chunking, right. Breaking it down.
Breaking it down. Select long sentences or phrases that you find challenging and break them down into smaller, more manageable chunks of meaning. Practice saying each individual chunk clearly, focusing on getting the pronunciation and intonation correct for that small part.
Practice the pieces.
Practice the pieces. Once you feel comfortable with each chunk, gradually start combining them, trying to maintain a natural flow and rhythm as you put the whole sentence back together. Practice this regularly, and you'll find it much easier to tackle longer and more complex sentences in conversation.
I can see that helping avoid feeling overwhelmed.
Definitely. And don't underestimate the value of using tongue twisters.
Tongue twisters,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah. They might seem like just silly wordplay, but they are actually fantastic for improving your pronunciation and articulation, especially with English sounds that you find particularly challenging. Think the sounds, our sounds, as versus sha.
Okay, makes sense.
Start by practicing them slowly and clearly, focusing on getting each sound right, and then gradually increase your speed while maintaining clarity. Things like, she sells seashells by the seashore.
Peter Piper picked.
Yeah, got it. I can definitely see how those would help with the physical mechanics and the clarity of speech. What about getting more comfortable with actual conversational flow, back and forth?
That's absolutely essential for building confidence in real-world skills. Make a conscious effort to find a language partner or join a language learning community where you can have regular conversations in English.
Find your people.
Find your people.
Yeah.
Before each conversation, it can be helpful to set a clear goal for yourself. For example, today I'll try to use past tense correctly, or I'll try to use 5 new phrases I learned.
Set an intention. Set an intention. During the conversation, practice active listening. Really pay attention to what your partner is saying, not just waiting for your turn to talk. And most importantly, don't be afraid to participate actively. Jump in.
Right.
Also, be open to both giving and receiving feedback on your speaking. It's a two-way street that can significantly benefit everyone involved in the language exchange. Ask for it. How did I sound?
These all sound like very actionable techniques that someone can start incorporating into their daily or weekly routine today. Now, let's talk about something really fundamental for everyday communication. Those high-frequency, everyday phrases that seem to pop up constantly in natural conversation. Why is it so important to really master these?
Oh, absolutely. Mastering these high-frequency, everyday phrases is absolutely crucial for making your spoken English sound more natural, for improving your fluency in a wide range of common situations, and ultimately for significantly boosting your confidence in your daily interactions.
The building blocks.
They really are the building blocks of everyday communication, seriously.
So it's not just about knowing the individual words within a phrase, but understanding how they come together as a unit to express a common idea, like a single lexical item.
Precisely, exactly that. These phrases help you build a really practical and immediately useful vocabulary. They significantly improve your fluency because you can recall and use these ready-made chunks of language without having to construct every sentence from scratch.
Saves brain power.
Totally. And perhaps most importantly, using these phrases correctly makes your speech sound much more natural and idiomatic. When you can effortlessly incorporate these common expressions into your conversations, you'll find that communication flows much more smoothly, and you'll feel much more comfortable and confident expressing yourself in a variety of everyday situations.
Can you give us some specific examples of the kinds of everyday phrases that are really worth focusing on for someone looking to improve their spoken English?
Absolutely. Think about the essential greetings and introductions. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, how are you doing? Nice to meet you. Basic stuff.
The basics, yeah.
Then there are the phrases we use for general small talk. How's your day going? What have you been up to lately? Even simple comments about the weather like, it's a beautiful day, isn't it?
Right. Conversation starters.
Exactly. If you're out and about, knowing phrases for asking for directions such as, excuse me, could you tell me how to get to, or for ordering food in a restaurant like, I'd like to have the, or could I get the bill, please, are incredibly useful.
Essential survival phrases.
Totally. The same applies to shopping, knowing how to ask, how much is this? Or do you have this in a different size? And then there's a whole category of phrases for making plans with people. Are you free on Saturday? Expressing your opinions politely, in my opinion. Could I think that? And asking for help when you need it. Could you help me with this? I don't understand.
Yeah, that's cover a lot of ground.
They're the fundamental building blocks of so many of our daily interactions.
So it's really about equipping yourself with the language you need to navigate real-life, everyday scenarios with greater ease and confidence. What are some effective ways to actually practice using these common phrases, not just memorize them?
Good point. Role-playing different everyday scenarios with a language partner is a fantastic way to practice. You could simulate ordering food, asking for directions, making small talk at a social gathering. Try switching roles so you get practice both asking and responding. Act it out. Keeping a language journal and actively trying to incorporate these everyday phrases into your sentences when you write about your day is also a very effective way to reinforce them.
Use them in writing first.
Exactly. Creating flashcards with the phrases written out and reviewing them regularly can help with memorization and recall. And of course, actively engage in language exchange with native speakers and specifically ask for feedback on how naturally you're using these common expressions. Did that sound okay?
Ask for that feedback.
Definitely. Pay close attention to how native speakers use these phrases in movies, TV shows, and podcasts. Notice the context and their intonation. How do they really use "how's it going"?
And what are some practical tips for making sure these phrases actually become a natural part of your active spoken vocabulary, something you can use without even consciously thinking about it, so they just come out?
Right, making them automatic. One really simple but effective trick is to consciously try to label things around your home or workplace with relevant English phrases. For example, you could put a sticky note on your coffee machine that says "making coffee," or on the door, "heading out."
Make it visual.
Make it visual and contextual. Try to narrate your daily actions to yourself using these phrases. If you're leaving the house, think or even say out loud, "I'm heading out." If you're cooking, "what's for dinner?"
Internal narration again.
Yep. Actively make an effort to incorporate these phrases into your conversations whenever the opportunity arises. Even if it feels a little forced or unnatural at first, the more you consciously use them, the more natural they will gradually become.
Push through the awkwardness.
Push through it. And again, don't underestimate the significant confidence boost you'll get when you find yourself effortlessly using these common expressions in everyday situations. Start small, practice consistently, and always be open to feedback from others.
This has been such an incredibly comprehensive and insightful deep dive into the world of bridging that sometimes frustrating gap between understanding and speaking English fluently. Really useful stuff. Before we wrap things up, could you give our listener a final summary of the key techniques and mindset strategies we've discussed, along with some encouraging words as they continue on their language learning journey?
Absolutely. Happy to. We've covered a significant amount of ground today, haven't we? From really understanding the core reasons why speaking can often feel more challenging than understanding.
Yeah, the why.
To the limitations of relying on mental translation, and importantly, highly effective strategies for cultivating the ability to think directly in English.
Thinking in English, key goal.
We've also tackled that very common and often debilitating fear of making mistakes, reframing it as a learning tool. And we've equipped you with a range of practical speaking techniques such as shadowing, recording yourself, and the strategic use of chunking.
The practical tools.
As well as emphasizing the fundamental importance of mastering those high-frequency everyday phrases to sound more natural and feel more confident.
And throughout all of that, we've highlighted the absolutely crucial role that your mindset plays in your progress. That came up again and again.
Exactly. Mindset is huge. Remember that the journey towards greater fluency requires consistent effort and dedicated practice. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Embrace the inevitable mistakes, view them as valuable learning opportunities, and please be patient and kind to yourself throughout the process.
Self-compassion.
Definitely. Don't underestimate the power of connecting with other language learners. Share your experiences, offer encouragement, and learn from each other. You're not alone in this. Stay motivated by setting realistic and achievable goals, acknowledging and celebrating your progress, no matter how small it might seem, and practicing gratitude for every step you take forward.
It truly is a continuous journey of growth and discovery, isn't it? There's no real finish line.
Precisely. Learning to speak a new language fluently is akin to rewiring your brain, like we talked about with neuroplasticity, and that kind of transformation takes both time and persistent effort. Be patient with your progress, celebrate your small victories along the way, and always remember that every conscious effort you make is bringing you one step closer to your ultimate goal of speaking English with confidence and genuine fluency. You can do it.
Such encouraging and insightful words to end on. Thank you so much for breaking all that down.
My pleasure.
And on that note, for you, our listener, here's something to think about. Consider which one, just one, of these practical techniques we discussed today you can immediately integrate into your daily routine, starting tomorrow, to begin seeing tangible progress in your spoken English.